NGE, Nobody Dies Chapter 13, Kyoko, an Evangelion fanfic. A start, a sharp intake of breath as the world comes back into focus. Muted struggle in a vain attempt to sit up, feeling hands gripping the metal bed frame and the wrists up to the forearms wrapped in leather. Asuka stares at the ceiling, her only sounds choked panic and sobs. They know. They know. They know, and they are going to kill Mother. The Section 2 agent does not leave the elevator with her. Snorting, Kyoko dusts off her lab coat, checks her PDA for any messages, and strides down the white metal hallway towards the double door of the commander's office, or mausoleum as it is more commonly referred to. She does not have time for this. The entire problem was that Unit 02 got its hands mangled. It means at least a week of induced regeneration and replating the armor over the fingers and palms before it can even hold a progressive knife. The logistics are a nightmare, as no EVA has suffered this level of digit damage before. The message was just to come to the office. There were things to discuss. Huffing, grinding her teeth, she swings open the door and strides in. The other bridge command staff are already there. They have been waiting. Ikari is behind his desk, Yu is sitting on it, and the three bridge staff, the lieutenants, are talking with Katsuragi. I still have paperwork to file on Unit 02's repairs, Kyoko says with a groan, rubbing the bridge of her nose as she walks towards the desk. It needs the forearms regenerated and hand-arm replaced. Please, quickly, what is it? Her eyes snap open as the pair of hands come just short of her neck, stepping back as the three lieutenants collectively struggle to hold back Misato. You sick bitch. Misato screams, I'm gonna take you apart like a cheap hair_ing watch. Katsuragi. Yui shouts, you can do that later. You did get her gun, yes? Gendo asks. Of course, Yui responds, we didn't take yours, though. What the hell is going on? Kyoko shouts, turning from Misato's murderous gaze to Ikari. I have better things to do than be threatened by your tactics, Commander. An almost animalistic growl from Katsuragi before she pulls free from Makoto and Maya, arms folded and teeth bared as Yui takes the file folder from her husband's desk. She stares at the pictures inside, walking from the desk, slowly, to Kyoko. Raising her eyes and meeting Kyoko's furious, insulted gaze, she waits. Her eyes narrow. The corner of her lip curls into the smallest resemblance of a snarl. Kyoko, she says, did you really think I would never find out? Find out what? Kyoko says, stop playing the damn game, Ikari. What in God's name are you talking about? Grunting, snarling, Yui shoves the file folder into Kyoko's hands. Snorting, she opens it. Her eyes go wide as she stares at the pictures, face twisting in confusion and then disgust, sneering at the images before closing the folder and staring at Yui. Is this, she starts, is this some sort of sick joke, Ikari? I'll show you sick, you sadistic little. Katsuragi, Yui snaps, Misato going silent under her gaze. The pilots are returning from sortie. Debrief them. A grumble from Katsuragi and a dirty look directed at Sahu. Yes, Mom, she says, save some of her for me. Chapter 13, Kyoko. His hands clench and unclench as Misato relates the events of the last couple of hours. He expected to find her waiting for them, but instead he hears this report about what was done to her by her own mother. Part of him wants to climb back into Unit 01, find the woman and squeeze. Fly me to Thamu and let me sleep among the stars. Will someone turn that goddamn music off? Mana shouts. Don't worry about it, Misato grumbles, running a hand through her hair. It helps the others sleep. I tend not to argue with the god-killing mecha about what constitutes easy listening. Sleep? Mana asks. As Dr. Ikari said, better safe than sorry. Yuri's expression is blank, as if his brain is trying to process what they have just told him. and failing miserably. Mana is tense, her helmet removed and dripping link goo on the floor, and Rei's expression is completely blank. There is no hint of emotion on it whatsoever. "Where is she?" Shinji asks, teeth gritted, just above a whisper. "She's in isolation," Misato responds. "Look, you have to get back to the office to help with the situation." "Shinji, she's in isolation because your mother's afraid she might attempt suicide." Misato turns and walks back into the lift. Swearing something in English, Mana turns and walks towards the showers, Yuri walking after her. His face looks deflated. Like the air, Thewel had left it. But that isn't important to him right now. Instead, he turns and begins walking towards the medical wing. He has a plan. Dr. Akagi was here to check up on her. There is an IV drip to keep her hydrated while she discusses things with someone, an assistant. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Everything will fall apart now. Mother is going to die because she couldn't tell them the truth. She failed her, failed Mother, like she's failed everyone else every second of every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month of every year of her miserable useless little life. The voice, again. Now she recognizes it. Papa is outside with the girl. He wants to see her, but Dr. Akagi says it isn't a good time. She needs to recover, Akagi says. She is on suicide watch, Akagi says. She tries to shift in the bed. Her ankles are restrained, too. She has to find someone, make them listen. Make them understand about Mother, that it wasn't Mother's fault. The struggles cease, muted as they were. The futility of this struggle, like every struggle over the course of her life, sets in. Tears begin streaming down her face as she closes her eyes, chest hitching with every sob. Silence reigns as once more, like she has done for almost every night since she was 5, Asuka cries herself to sleep. "I have limits," Yui says, "I have my limits. Kyoko, you have managed to cross every single one of them." Kyoko says nothing, flipping between the pictures. Her face is unreadable, stoic, only her eyes having any expression as they trace down the lines, over the circles. The scars down the back start at the shoulder, red and deep grooves running down past the small of her back. There are 5 major ones, worked over as far as they can tell for a number of years until they went from cuts to full-on depressions, into muscle but stopping before the bone. "This is not possible," Kyoko breathes. "Believe it," Yui says, snatching the pictures from Sahu's hands. "I've had my doubts, Kyoko. Believe me, I've had my doubts. I always knew how valuable your EVA project was for you, but I never thought you'd be capable of this." She cycles through the pictures, holding up the shot of the back of the neck. "Tell me why, Kyoko," Yui says. Sahu narrows her eyes, grabbing the picture, staring at it. "No, no," Yui says, folding her arms as she circles her, "I can see why. It makes sense. At 5 years old, you go around my edict against human testing in the contact experiments. You take your 5-year-old daughter, shove her into the entry plug and fry her brain. Then you discard her, belittle her, let her grow into a broken shell while you lavish your gift from the old men with your praise and attention." She leans forward, Kyoko's face unreadable. "Am I right?" Knuckles crack as Kyoko's fist clenches. She turns, eyes narrowed as the picture crumples in her hand. "Do you really think I would use that girl in my EVA?" she asks. She grabs the pictures, walking over and slamming them on the desk, turning back to Yui and snorting. Arms folded, Yui blinks, confused as Gendo takes the folder and begins perusing the pictures. "An interesting fantasy," Kyoko says, pushing her glasses up her nose, "but that girl has never been inside an entry plug. I made it a point that she was not be allowed to pilot, so why do you think I would use her of all people, to base my masterpiece on?" She grins, squaring her shoulders, and waits. The response comes in the form of a closed fist to the face which sends her to the floor, and she looks up to find Obu and Makato holding Maya by the arms, the girl screaming profanities as she kicks, held off the ground by the two struggling lieutenants. The phone rings, and sighing, Gendo presses the intercom. Yes. Commander, the third child is here and demanding entry into the isolation ward. We were given orders by Dr. Ikari and Dr. Akagi to not allow entry to Miss Suru's room. Yui swears, walking over to the desk as Kyoko picks herself up. Excuse me? Shinji asks, but I happen to know the password that allows me entry to any part of the base. Yeah? And what is that, pilot? Ray. A sound of a dropping ventilation grate on the other side of the intercom and feet landing lightly. Wait, what does that? He. Oh, F_SHE's behind US. Sounds of something hard hitting heads, unconscious security guards dropping and the intercom cutting off. Well, Gendo says, this is interesting. She wakes up in a cold sweat. She never cared much about appearance, was never given a reason to. The last time she even did something like going to a spa was only on Uri's insistence when she graduated. Her hair is sticky on her scalp and her face is wet, and her nose is stuffed. Her throat is dry and her body is sore. She can feel the cuts on her wrist from her previous struggle. She doesn't mind being alone. She is used to being alone. Whenever Uri had to do tests for Mother would leave her alone. It is as it always was, but now she does mind. She does mind being alone. She doesn't want to be alone. This is the room? She has to be hallucinating. She could have sworn that was Shinji's voice. She really hopes it is him, but she doesn't want it to be him. She doesn't want him to see her like this, see her this weak, this useless, this pitiful. Crap. It's locked. I have the key. Really, Ray? Where is it? A white-clad fist bursts through the steel-reinforced door. Feeling around, the owner hums a tune before grabbing the latch doorknob and yanking it down. Light creeps into the white, darkened room as the door opens, and she hears footsteps, hurried before skidding to a stop at the bed. Latches around her right wrist release first, and blinking away the tears, she stares into blue eyes. Hey, Shinji says. She croaks a whispered greeting, fresh tears streaming down her tears as her left wrist is freed. The ankles are next and he helps her sit up, sitting on the bed next to her, still stinking of the LCL and still in his plug suit, and she realizes in that moment he headed here straight from the EVA. He rests his hands on her arms, Asuka noticing for the first time she is in a hospital gown, her body tired, her wrists and ankles sore, and he still came here first. I came as soon as I could, he says, the cleanup took longer than we thought and God. My Sato told me and... She lunges forward, wrapping her arms around him. Her face buries itself in his chest and her shoulders hitch, her entire body shaking as miserable, racking sobs force themselves out of her mouth. His arms tighten around her, the material of the plug suit creaking as his arms encircle her, one hand resting on the back of her head, the tears and snot mixing with the LCL as he closes his eyes, burying his nose in her hair. Riz at the bed now, her hand resting on Asuka's shoulder. Her face is almost expressionless, save for the small downward twinge of the corner of her lip. She squeezes the shoulder once, smiles to Shinji, and walks out. The cries turn to sniffling and Asuka pulls back a little, the pained smile on her face as he helps her sit up, helping her to her knees. I'm sorry, she says, her voice hoarse, painful. Don't be, he responds, I swear, Asuka, if there's anything of your mother left when Mom is done with her. Her eyes snap open, hands over her mouth. Oh God, she whispers, we have to talk with her. We have to stop them before they hurt her. Stop them? He asks, seriously, stop them? After what she did to you? Asuka starts, and shakes her head, Shinji, please. Why you have to understand. Mother D didn't do this to me. He turns her to her. Scenarios start running through his mind, none of them pleasant, and Asuka squeaks in surprise when she sees the cold anger in his eyes. It is no surprise to anyone that he has indeed inherited the look from his parents. "Who did this to you?" he demands. Her eyes clench shut, head pitched forward. "I did." "They're what?" "These wounds," Gendo says, holding up the picture of the scars, "are self-inflicted." "What?" Yuya and Kyoko shout. The two scientists stop, turn and stare at each other, then turn back to the commander with scowls on their faces. "The wounds are self-inflicted," he says, narrowing his eyes and frowning, "all of them. The angle of impact and dragging is all wrong, especially with the back scars. Look at the shoulder marks. This suggests the back wounds were done over the shoulder, so the belt that was used couldn't be used by someone behind her." He adjusts his glasses, chewing the inside of his cheek as he spreads the pictures out. The three bridge bunnies are behind him, Maya looking faintly nauseous, Makoto and Oba wearing their concern on their faces. "I've beaten enough people to know what the marks would look like," Gendo continues. "These are all done from the front, over the shoulder." "What about the neck?" Yui says. "Did she just drag herself into an entry plug?" Gendo pauses, turning to his wife. He pushes his glasses up his nose and gestures Kyoko forward with two fingers, grabbing her wrist and jamming his thumb down. "Did you ever perform a contact experiment on your daughter?" "No," she answers. "Have you ever beaten your daughter?" "No." He lets her go, turning back to the pictures, arranging them to the circles on the neck. "This aren't electrical burns," he says, "this are made with an AC cigarette lighter. Look at the angle of the middle burn. The right is more faded than the left, which means this was done at an angle. If anything, I would say she was trying to emulate the effect of a contact experiment on herself." Yui scowls, rubbing the bridge of her nose, Kyoko folding her arms and scowling. "Why would she do that?" Maya asks. "Attention," Yui sighs, "psychosis. Abandonment issues. She gets yanked from her mother's big project and gives herself the mutilation that the experiment would have given her as a badge of honor. It gets worse over time, and..." Yui shakes her head, grinding her teeth. Rubbing her temples and biting back swears and threats, she takes a deep breath and turns to Maya, staring directly at her, her back to Sehu. There's scarring over her palms from just digging her nails into them. "We knew she had issues, abandonment issues and confidence issues. She stutters, she seeks praise and she is slow to really bond to people, but we underestimated the full extent of what this has done to her. In all honesty, I think Asuka would be flattered if her mother beat her." Footsteps leading away and they turn, finding Kyoko swearing Teutonic curse words as she made a beeline for the door. She gets halfway across when the door swings open and Misato walks in, her right hand clenched into a fist as she glares at the woman. "Katsuragi!" Yui shouts, "Let her pass." "Give me a reason," she growls. "I said to let her pass." "I wasn't talking to you, Dr. Ikari," Misato says, narrowing her eyes as she glares at Kyoko. "Come on, Dr. Sehu. Give me a reason." A smirk crosses Misato's face, and she walks past Sehu, walking past her and to the desk. As she approaches and she listens, Kyoko walks out, breaking into the run as she heads for the lift doors. Sitting next to each other on the hospital bed, her knees up against her chest, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, they wait. She hasn't said anything since the admission. She waits for him to leave, to yell at her, to curse her, but he doesn't. His hold on her becomes tighter, if anything. "I don't know why it started," she says, her voice hoarse, squeaky. "I don't know why. I don't know why. I've been so bad, been so useless. I can't tell why I did it. I thought it would be like she wanted me to be, if I was burned like the Eva was supposed to burn me." Closes her eyes, takes more deep, shaking breaths. "She's been bad," she says, "we've been bad. I've been bad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." He pulls her closer, pressing his lips against her forehead, tasting the sweat and fear. "I'd all right," he says, "it's all right. Do you want to go home?" Why yes," she chokes, "I want to go home." "Okay," he whispers back, rubbing her back, "I'll clear it with my mom after we get home." "You'll clear it with me now, young man." Silhouetted in the doorway, flanked by Dr. Akagi and by Misato, Yui folds her arms and glares at her son, who does not flinch or hesitate as he stands up. He meets her gaze with his own, standing in front of Asuka out of instinct, hands clenching into fists and scowling. "What are you thinking?" Yui demands. "I can ask you the same thing, Mom," he shouts back, "I'm taking her home. I'm not letting you stick her in a dark room and just tie her to a bed like an animal." "It's for her own good," Yui says, rolling her shoulders, arching her eyebrows to stare down at him. "She could have been a danger to herself. Tell me, what if I refuse to release her? Then I think your pilot corps going to go on strike." A sideways glance and Yui frowns, her tactics commander grinning. "Katsuragi?" "I'm siding with Shinji," Misato responds, "if it's okay." "Mom." Yui rolls her eyes, glancing at Ritsuko. Akagi shrugs, turns, and walks down the hall. "Very well," Yui says with a smile, "I leave the responsibility to you, Shinji. Asuka, get dressed and Misato will take you home. We'll talk tomorrow. Is that all right?" "Yes, Mom," Asuka whispers. Another glance between Yui and her son, and the head of Project E turns on her heel and walks away, her frown turning into a smile as she clears the hallway, out of earshot and sight. "Good boy." He waits for minutes before he makes up his mind, standing outside the door to her office. He wants to charge in, screaming righteous indignation, but it would be hollow, wouldn't it? He has no moral high ground. Yes, her actions lead to this, but if he spent more than a couple hours in his daughter's life over the past 16 years he could have helped. Fingers wrapped on the door, and there is no response. He hears creaking, the moaning of a swinging light fixture. The door is unlocked, he finds with a testing push, and he opens the door. The first thing that catches his eye is the Nobel Prize, broken and at his feet, having been thrown across the office and against the door. The second he sees is Kyoko, sitting at her desk and staring at photos, a bottle of scotch and empty shot glass next to them. He knows what the photos are, of course. The entire command staff knows what they are, and until they found out the truth he had to convince Fuatsuki not to order security to drag her out and shoot her. "Hello, Peter," she says, "come for your pound of flesh, as well?" He sighs, walking in. Not invited but not unwelcome. She is leaning on her elbows, intent on the pictures, whispering oaths to herself as she stares. "Well, you're too late," she says, "everyone's gotten their fill. Katsuragi wants to shoot me. I owe my life to Commander Ikari." "And you?" he asks. "I want to just hang myself and call it a day," she whispers, face contorting, eyes wide as she stares at the photos. "Got, Peter. What have I done to this girl?" He doesn't respond, doesn't say a thing. Hands folded at his waist he watches as she takes up the picture of the back of Asuka's neck, looking at it in detail, in intent before dropping it and slumping back in her chair. "Do you know why?" "Why what?" he asks. "Why I yanked her out of the program," she says. "I was afraid. I took her out because she could have ended up like that, having her soul sucked out of her through the back of her neck." Face buried in her hands, she moans, running her hands through her hair as he watches, biting his lip and waiting. "God," she moans, "God damn it. I kept telling myself I could fix things when the angels were dead. I kept rationalizing it, but the truth is that it's F_ed up. I've F_ed up so badly, haven't I?" "Is that what you think?" he asks. "Yes," she says, "yes, it may be. I have no idea how to approach her. Beauty is like my presence hurts her by me even being there. I need to think. Do you think I need that? He sighs, shaking his head, not out of disagreeing but out of the lack of words to convey. Waiting, watching, he lets her sit back in her chair, looking at him, maybe past him. God help me, she says, I've turned into my mother. She pushes herself up, shakily standing, eyes bleary and blurry as she tries to circle the desk and fails, nearly falling and finding him catching her. She chortles, slapping him on the shoulder as her groans collapse into giggles and laughs. You're drunk, he says. I'm f_ing hammered, she laughs, just get me to my car, manservant. He grunts an acknowledgement, throwing her arm over his shoulder. Fine, but I'm driving, he says, and starts carrying her out. The lift door opens, and Yui stares at the sole other occupant. Raising an eyebrow in appraisal, she takes a step in, turning and standing to the front and right of her husband as she presses the button leading down to the sub-command levels, just above the limbi zone and terminal dogma. So, she says. So, he responds, Shinji is even more protective of Asuka. Katsuragi has become maternal towards the both of them. Earl is wavering in his loyalty to his mother and Saru will be less likely to try anything as she knows we are watching her closely. Yes, indeed, she says, a small chuckle as she folds her hands behind her. Peter will be easier to keep around, he continues, as he is now concerned for his daughter, given the circumstances. And Kyoko now owes me her life, giving me ownership of a human being. Yui grins. I love it when a plan comes together. His white-gloved hands begin rubbing her shoulders as a grin crosses his features. Did you plan to have Maya punch Saru? She asks. I set up the placement of people in the office, he responds. If she wasn't actually attacked, she would have suspected it was for show. And you're going into full outraged maternal mode? Brilliant. A grin crosses her features, fingers adjusting the glasses on her nose. I only channeled what I felt before I recognized they were self-inflicted, she says, but you played every member of the command staff like a fiddle. And you still left them thinking you are nothing more than my arm candy. She turns around, resting her arms on his shoulders. I only did that, he says, because in all aspects, my skills pale to yours. And you're still doing it now, she says, playing with me to get what you want. Her grin becomes wider, showing teeth before her foot slams the emergency stop button. You magnificent bastard. And things go from there. The doors to the elevator open in the garage, and Peter and Kyoko stare at the space where her car should be. You had it shipped over from Berlin? He asks. She nods. Shame. The air is still hazy where the car was parked, and steam still lazily hovers from the fire suppression system. Tentatively, he walks over, Kyoko standing in the entrance of the elevator and staring as her ex-husband stares at the scene, stares at the thing which at some point in the recent past was a car. It was a nice car, too. He remembered seeing it in the garage. It was European, kind of sporty, and had a nice stereo. Right now, it has none of those things, at least nothing that wasn't mostly melted by the fire. He stares at the hood, reaches out, and picks up the standout object. A squeaky mallet. Someone doesn't like you anymore, he says, let's take a car from the motor pool. Security quickly caught the people responsible for the arson of Dr. Saru's car, and as such, Shinji, Asuka, and Misato had to detour from the drive home to the local nerve precinct to post bail for all 7 culprits. I had nothing to do with this. You came along. Because you tied me up, Kirishima. And you didn't complain. Because you gagged me, Ayanami. Misato rubs her temples, Asuka sighs, and Shinji rolls his eyes. Showing solidarity was one thing, but trashing someone's property was another. Tsuji shrugs, Hikari shrinks on the bench next to him, and Mana and Re both beaming at what they believe is a productive night's work. Yuri is fuming but stops when he sees his sister, even if he is sitting a little too closely to Mari, and Kensuke resembles a lost dog at a pound. Asuka leans over to Shinji, staring at their glasses-wearing friend, who is rocking back and forth and muttering something. "Shinji," she says, "why is Kensuke worried about being a prison bitch?" Buttoning her collar, Yui rolls her shoulders with a sigh, sitting against the elevator wall as Gendo takes a chilled bottle of red wine from the hidden compartment underneath the button facing and two glasses, pouring for her as they share a smile. "Well, this worked for the best," she says. "I must say, you are like a fine wine. You get better with age. I think half the reasons I run these gambits is because they turn you on." He chuckles, sipping his wine as he sits down next to her. "They'll thank us for this, in time. When should we move to the next phase?" "Let them cool down," she says, shuffling next to him, hand on his knee as she rests her back on his chest. "Shinji and Asuka should be returning to their apartment after bail is posted. Let Peter pursue his ex-wife. And, of course, Ren knows the truth about the situation with Asuka and her mother." "Of course," he says. "Because you told her." His face screws in confusion, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you told her," he responds. She sits up, stares at him. They stare at each other, and their eyes go wide before she starts digging through her discarded lab coat for her cell phone. One thing leads to another. A muted thanks lead to an invitation into the apartment, which lead to sharing a drink, which lead to a muted asking to not be alone after a day this disastrously bad, which lead to the first read contact she had in 16 years, not counting one-night stands, and two very lonely people sharing a bed. He is out like a light, and she is snoring, despite the occasional tick of muted guilt crossing her face. Her face is mashed up against the pillow, him behind her, arm wrapped around her, as Peter and Kyoko are well and truly drifted off into sleep. It would take a good bomb blast to wake them, which is why they don't see it or hear it. Two eyes open in the shadows of the room, flat against the wall, glowing crimson and watching them. Surrounding the two eyes, another 8 eyes open, also blood-colored. Around them, another 32 eyes open, also colored like a deep, vengeful tide. Na/na/na/na/na/na/na/na/na. A phone clicks open. "Hello, Ray, it's Yui. So he's not responsible for Asuka's scars. Asuka just has more emotional problems than we thought." The phone clicks shut. The eyes narrow, every other one opening wide in tune with a possible eyebrow raising to consider the information. The 32 eyes blink shut first, followed by the 8. Then the 2 remain, and they sag, lowering, before closing and disappearing.